The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the warm sweetness of pastries inside the little cafe on the corner of Willow Street, where the hum of conversation blended with the gentle clatter of cups and saucers. She had built this place with her bare hands, not just brick by brick but with heart and resilience, pouring into it all the dreams she once thought had been shattered forever. The cafe was her sanctuary now, her safe haven, where no one knew about the years she had spent healing from the wound of a love she thought she'd never survive. She never imagined that the past would walk through her doors on a quiet Tuesday morning. And yet, that was exactly what happened. Because the man she had tried to erase from her life stepped into her cafe as if fate itself had carried him there. And in one small, fateful moment, her little girl looked up, eyes wide and curious, and whispered the word that made the air freeze between them. Daddy. He hadn't changed in a way that mattered. Tall, with that same commanding presence that once turned boardrooms silent and made her heart race, the CEO who once ruled her entire world was standing in front of her. But now, instead of meeting him in glittering hotels, in the sleek lines of limousines, or in the towering glass office that smelled of power and money, she saw him here in her quiet cafe, looking oddly out of place among chipped mugs and chalkboard menus. His eyes, those storm gray eyes she once knew better than her own reflection, landed on her, and for the first time in years, she felt the ground slip beneath her feet. She wanted to tell her daughter not to say it again, not to pierce the fragile bubble of their carefully built life, but it was too late. The word hung between them like a truth neither could deny. His eyes flicked down to the little girl with chestnut curls and a smile that looked far too much like his mother's once had. And then back to her. In that moment, silence thundered louder than anything else. He hadn't expected this. He had come into the cafe by chance, following the aroma of coffee while in town for a meeting. He hadn't expected to see her. God, after all those years, he'd stopped hoping he ever would. But seeing the little girl, hearing that one word, something inside him twisted, a realization slamming into him so hard it almost knocked the air out of his lungs. His daughter. His. She wanted to run. She wanted to grab her daughter, retreat into the kitchen, and close the door to everything he had ever been. But running wasn't possible anymore, not when the past had just collided with the present in the most irreversible way. And so she stood there, holding her breath, heart racing, wondering how fate could be this cruel, or maybe, this merciful. Years ago, they had been unstoppable. She was young, fiery, and determined to carve her place in the world, while he was already a rising star, a man whose name meant success and whose ambition outpaced everyone else's. They had met by accident, two different worlds colliding one rainy night when her car broke down and he stopped to help. He had been too polished, too self-assured, the kind of man she told herself she'd never fall for. But one smile from him and the rest had been history. Their love had been like a storm, passionate and consuming, sweeping her into a life she never thought she'd know. But ambition has its price. His world of power and ruthless deals demanded sacrifices, and though he loved her, he let go of her when his empire came first. She remembered the night he left, the way his words sliced through her, cold and final. He told her he couldn't give her the life she wanted, that she deserved someone who could choose her over everything else. She had begged him not to let go, but he walked away, choosing the world instead of her. And she, broken and alone, had discovered weeks later that she was carrying his child. She never told him, because how could she? He had made his choice, and she refused to beg for a place in his life. So she built her own. She worked through nights, saved every penny, and poured her soul into a cafe that became not only her business but her second home. She raised her daughter with love and honesty, giving her everything except the one thing she could not provide, a father's presence. Now, that missing piece stood in front of them. And she could see the questions forming in his eyes, the pain, the anger, the betrayal. He asked to speak with her. She refused at first, but when her daughter tugged her sleeve, asking why Daddy looked sad, she couldn't bring herself to deny the inevitable. They sat at a corner table, the world around them blurring into a distant hum as they faced each other for the first time in years. His voice was rougher now, threaded with emotions he wasn't used to showing, as he asked the question she had dreaded since the day she found out she was pregnant. Is she mine? The truth came out in fragments, in words she'd rehearsed 100 times in her head but never thought she'd have to say. Yes, she was his. Yes, She had kept it from him. No, it wasn't out of malice, it was out of survival. She had loved him too much to tie herself to a man who didn't choose her when it mattered most. She had been too proud to raise their child in the shadow of his indifference. He listened, and for the first time, the CEO who always controlled every detail of his world looked utterly undone. He had missed her first steps, her first words, every birthday, every scraped knee. He had missed years that he could never get back. And yet, as his daughter climbed into his lap without hesitation, as though she had always known who he was, something inside him shifted. He realized he didn't just want to make up for lost time, he needed to. The weeks that followed weren't easy. He showed up at the cafe every day, learning how to make hot chocolate just the way his daughter liked it, listening to her chatter about school, and awkwardly joining in tea parties on the floor. The man who once commanded empires now sat at tiny tables with paper crowns, letting himself be pulled into a world that was messy and real. And the woman who had once sworn to keep her heart safe found herself breaking piece by piece as she watched him fall in love with the daughter he never knew. But love between them was more complicated. The past still lingered, heavy with hurt. She didn't trust him not to leave again, and he didn't know how to prove that he was no longer the man who once walked away. And yet, there were moments, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his hand brushed hers as they worked side by side in the cafe, that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, they could rewrite their story. One evening, long after the cafe had closed, he stayed behind to help her clean up. They talked, not about business or responsibilities, but about fears and regrets, about the nights they lay awake wondering what could have been. And when he finally told her that walking away from her had been the biggest mistake of his life, she saw the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, stripped of his armor, vulnerable and real. It wasn't an instant fix. Forgiveness takes time, love takes courage, and rebuilding takes patience. But slowly, day by day, step by step, they began to stitch together something new. Not the storm they once had, but something steadier, rooted in the laughter of a little girl who had unknowingly brought them back together. And one morning, as the sun spilled through the windows of the cafe, he knelt down beside their daughter and asked her if she thought it would be okay if he stayed forever. The little girl beamed, clapping her hands as she declared that Daddy already belonged here. And when he turned to her, eyes full of hope and love, she realized that maybe fate hadn't been cruel after all. Maybe it had simply waited for the right moment to bring them home. Because years after leaving her, the CEO had walked back into her life, into her cafe, and into the heart of the daughter he never knew. And as they stood together in the place she had built from ashes, she understood that sometimes, the greatest stories don't end when love is lost. They begin again when it finds its way back. Dear friend, I'll ask you the same question she once whispered to herself on sleepless nights. Do you believe in second chances? If you do, then don't forget to subscribe, because love like this deserves to be told again and again. And maybe, just maybe, the next story will be yours.